Hello, people of the internet. I am Kaiji Noir,
And I'm Pete.
and this is our review for The Hobbit, Part 2, The Desolation of Smaug? How do you pronounce that anyway?
Smoog?
Smog? Because at first I thought it was smog, but then I hear like Smaug. Anyways, the Desolation of the Smaug Monster is the second of the Hobbit trilogy, which continues off from the first Hobbit movie. And so, just wondering, Pete, since you were not here when I reviewed the first Hobbit movie, I just wanted to know, what is your exposure to the Hobbit / Lord of the Rings franchise?
I recently watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but like coincidental tradition, we're going to keep it to the point where, for some reason, I never watched the first movie, but you already have, and I decided to watch the sequel. I mean, that's pretty much tradition that's been going on for quite a while now.
Right,
By coincidence.
Yeah, like Thor and this movie and another movie we're going to be doing.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Right. So in this movie, it carries right after the first Hobbit movie, where you have Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit. He is with a group of 12 dwarves, led by Thorin, who is like the prince / king of the dwarves, and Gandalf the Grey. They're off to go to the Lonely Mountain to kill a dragon named Smaug, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And at the same time, there's also a subplot involving the return of the villain Sauron from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's kind of funny how you have... I'm not sure... Yeah, I think I already mentioned this before in last year's review, that it's kind of weird how you had like a one book with a simple tale of off to kill a dragon, and it stretched it out to 3 movies.
I know. There's this picture that I've seen, and it's literally, it's got the Lord of the Books, 3 movies, 3 books, and then it's got The Hobbit, and it's got Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Money.
I think I used that image in my last review.
Oh God, I'm like. I mean, so far, like seeing how the first and second movie have been split up, how do you feel about the decision that they made for that? With just keeping in mind that it's a book and it's much smaller than even the first book itself, right?
I feel like I like what they were doing, what they're actually doing. At first, I thought it was a completely idiotic idea. I mean, it was originally going to be 2 movies. I'm like, okay, sure, and you can really tell that tell that they split the second movie into 2 movies, because this movie ends with a cliffhanger, so you can tell that at this point this was originally like planned as like a 3-hour movie, and they said, well, actually no, perhaps like maybe a 4-hour movie or something. I don't know, like something like Watchmen levels of length, like 3 hours 25 minutes. But I watched the first one, and I highly praised it. I loved it, and I like the universe building, because they took a lot. It seemed like Peter Jackson and company, they took a lot of elements that were either briefly mentioned or never mentioned at all in the Hobbit book, and expanded upon them. Like the villain from the first movie, which was he was called the White Orc. He was the orc with that like hook hand or something. He was the one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he was the main villain of the last movie, and he was like briefly mentioned in a flashback sequence in the book, and here, they made him into a full-on servant of the necromancer. And in this movie, from what I've researched, Gandalf, of course, he had to leave the group, but they never explained what he was doing. So they took advantage of that and have him on a journey to investigate the necromancer in order to prevent the darkness from spreading.
So you're telling me in the book they never really mentioned what Gandalf was doing in between in that when he disappears, essentially.
Right, because I believe that the reason why the author, what was his name? Tolkien.
Tolkien, yeah.
Yeah, the reason why he took him out was because having a wizard there will just like make everything easier for them.
I think not only that, but I think I read somewhere, I could be wrong. This is the internet, but I think The Hobbit was written without the intention initially of going with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. At least from what I've heard, it wasn't meant to be a part of. I don't know. That's just stuff I've heard in the past, or stuff I've heard. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. That's all I can say.
Sure.
But
yeah. Not, don't even believe us.
Oh, well, I'm just saying. But I'm just rambling. But go on.
Well, I was really digging the connections that this story was making to the original trilogy, and they even went so far as to bring in Legolas, played once again by Orlando Bloom. Now, just wondering, did you felt like he and the whole elf subplot, felt forced or like crammed in, or do you think it like gelled well?
Well, I'm trying to think because honestly, like, I'm trying to think what the movie would have been like without that little section, without that section, whether it was really important, whether it was just filler. And I can see what you mean because even though Legolas was brought back, you don't really get much personality out of him, and
Really?
I don't feel like you did. I mean, he was a really I felt like in this particular movie, he was a really quiet character, and he didn't talk that much, and he was very stern and very serious. And obviously, I feel part of the reason is because his character is obviously expanded on in the trilogy.
I felt like with this movie, he was a very different character because this was like years before his appearance in the Lord of the Rings, and here he's much more I guess arrogant. He's much more of a he's much more he likes to he puts down he sees himself he sees other races as inferior to him. He's kind of like this person who just doesn't care about. He's like a very selfish character, and very selfish and arrogant, and I think that fits, I really it didn't feel like he was crammed in just for the sake of having Legolas in there.
I guess I can see what you mean now because now looking back, I do realize that the trilogy does focus on his relationship with getting along with other the dwarf Gimli, right?
Yeah.
It focuses on his growing relationship with him, so I can understand what you're getting at from there.
And I really like the female elf in this story. What was it like, Tariel? I keep wanting to say Taliel Al Ghul. Let's see, Tariel. Yeah, played by Evangeline Lilly. I really liked her. I think she's an original character, and yeah, she was definitely a big surprise to see, and I really enjoyed her subplot when there's this like romantic tension between her and one of the 12 dwarves.
As for that, she was somewhat of an interesting character. Again, I guess for me, the whole else part, it really didn't do much for me, and I wasn't honestly too invested in her. At parts I was like, oh, like what is she gonna choose? But like deep down inside I'm like, well, she's gonna choose the guy. Even though she has a responsibility or something else. In these types of situations, she's gonna choose the guy, and I'm spoiling it.
Well, I do have to say this the thing I really liked about this story that what made it different from the other one with the first movie, it was mostly about Bilbo having to gain the courage to fully invest himself in this like arduous task of going up against impossible odds. And so that was sort of like his movie, his like major character arc, finding courage. And this movie felt like it was focusing a lot on Thorin more, especially with the theme of greed. Seeing like this is greed is like one of the biggest evils that can easily suck anyone in. You have a Thorin who is like desperately seeking this jewel called the Arkenstone, which will give him like the authority to rule over the dwarves. You have of course you have a Bilbo and his growing obsession with the ring.
Oh, that's very apparent. They're very apparent with the movie.
And of course you have Smaug, who is obsessed with his stolen treasure. Or it's stolen, but it's his, but it was stolen from the dwarves.
No, I definitely see what you mean because throughout the movie the word greed is thrown around a lot, and it's mostly directed towards Thorin, because throughout the movie, like I don't know if his character was always this way in the first one, but it seems like his character is growing and more desperate towards his goals. He's going to like He's basically changing and not caring for other things like he did. Especially there's some scenes, especially around the third act, where it really starts to show that his character may not be everything you think he is or everything that he wants to be.
Right.
Even though he's prepping himself up and he's showing to everyone that he's going to be this great man.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's so desperate to follow his own expectations that he's willing to do anything for that one. And I do have to say, another thing that I really liked, I felt like this movie improved over the last one, was its pacing. Because with the first movie, it was mostly, half of it was setup. Now, I know a lot of people had issues with the first movie, especially when it came to the pacing, because it took like half an hour just for Bilbo to get on his journey. And for me personally, I wasn't bothered by that. I just really enjoyed the world building in that movie. But for here, it's like, because this all the setup is like already established. They're like they're already on the go. You're already seeing them running from the orcs. You see another whole bunch of characters. It's like point A to point B to point C, and there's always something happening and exciting along the way.
That's exactly what I was thinking through my head throughout the movie. I basically could segment the parts. If I really wanted to divide the movie into three segments, we have segment A, segment B, and like you said, segment C, and they're all easily divided and easily connected, and you can follow them easily through.
It has a lot of variety. It's kind of very simplistic storytelling. We keep mentioning point A, point B, point C, point D, and just so many exciting things that goes on in this movie. I especially love the barrel chase scene.
That it was fun. I'll give you that. I'll just go on and say it. My favorite part was near the ending. See with Smaug.
Smaug, yes.
Honestly, I did not know that he was voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
But I already liked him. But just hearing that made it a big plus in my book.
Right. Who would have thought that this guy he already like this year he was voicing two like awesome villains. It's funny things like Benedict Cumberbatch and what was his name, Martin Freeman. They were Sherlock and Watson in the new BBC Sherlock series.
Yeah, when you told me that, I was like, wait, seriously?
Yeah, Sherlock versus Watson.
In this case, it's Bilbo versus Smaug.
Yes. And my God, Smaug is so awesome. I will say that this version of Smaug will go down in history as like one of the greatest giant monsters in the history of cinema. King Kong, Godzilla, Gamera, Smaug.
Yeah, he was really slick, and that booming voice. Again.
Yes, like the thing is, giant monsters are scary enough. Giant monsters that talk down to you, that's a whole other level, man.
Yeah, and the way he was talking to, he that's funny. His roles, he always seems to command a presence. Mm-hmm. And that's always that's a role, or that you can see that in a great actor. In this case, he's just voice acting.
Mm-hmm. I just love that how like this character. He knows that he takes such pride in his ego. He's like egomaniacal, but he takes pride in that fact. He knows he is the biggest, baddest mofo in the whole world.
Oh, you're gonna mess with me? Well, I'm gonna go destroy everything you care about, cause I'm a dick.
Yes. You know what? Cause I'm Smaug, son.
I'm Smaug. I'm gonna go ruin this.
I'm Smaug. And I just want to see like a picture of Smaug in like with like a pimp coat and a pimp cane. I'm Smaug. Let's see. And I think he was also the voice of the Necromancer.
Yes,
which,
he was.
Yeah, which is a pretty big surprise. I didn't know that going into this one. And this present of the Necromancer, which pretty much is... It's not really a spoiler to say that it's Sauron, because like we keep mentioning before, they keep hammering the fact that Sauron, the great evil, is coming, and that all the dark creatures are gathering for the great war.
Which is a great build-up, and especially it's building up to the Lord of the Rings.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just set in motion. Like really, like you would think that a story about going off to kill a dragon would
be enough.
Would be enough, or would have nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. But I think the dragon is supposed to play an important part in the army, so if they take care of Smaug, then that's like a crucial part of Sauron's army gone.
I never even thought of it that way. That's a good point.
Because even Smaug himself is aware of the coming war, and I guess serving like the all-powerful master.
Now I want to ask you, what did you think of the dwarves? Because I heard from a lot of people that I heard a lot of people weren't big fans of the dwarves, and at least not all of them. Mm-hmm. Some of them I found people said that they enjoyed them, but others they found them just to be silly, to be over the top. like I said, I didn't watch the first movie, so I don't know how it was. And I feel like in this second movie, they didn't go too over the top. I enjoyed it for the most part. You know, it was nice seeing a throwback to or like the
Gimli.
Gimli. You know,
Yeah,
Gimli's
because one
father.
of them is Gimli's father, and I was like, oh, it's cool, it's cool.
Yeah, but I don't know. How did you feel about that?
I really dug the dwarves in the first movie, and here I think they're played a little less for laughs here, especially with the fat dwarf Gimli's father, and they did obviously develop one of them for the sake of a romantic subplot. And Thorin, he was always like the primary dwarf.
You were gonna say orc.
Yeah, and I like the older dwarf, the one kind of looks like Santa Claus or something.
Yeah.
Santa dwarf. He was like the guy he's the oldest and most experienced, so he kind of like has his encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah. See, one thing I like about them though is, like I said, I can't judge them for the first one, but I like that in this one. While they were funny, it was very serious. You know, there was very serious situations. You know, they took things rather seriously, and you know that's something I could appreciate when you could just write them off for laughs.
Yeah, and yes, there is a problem that's carried off from the first movie where not all of them are developed very well. They're mostly just there to be the dwarves. And though I think here more of the dwarves got to have their own moments in the spotlight. Especially Gimli's father with that awesome barrel sequence. He's just like in the barrel.
Oh my
and the
God.
barrel is just he is rolling down a hill, taking out like 20 orcs.
And by the end of it, his barrel breaks. He breaks out 2 axes. Bam, boom, back in another barrel.
Yes,
It was all meant to happen. He planned it all out.
Oh yeah, totally. He of course, of all the dwarves, he is a master strategist. Let's see. If there was any, were there any things that bothered you, or stuck out real badly?
Man, the moment I started watching, I feel like the CGI just stands out so much. Like I even asked you, like as soon as we started seeing like the orcs, especially, and you asked me if they stand out in a good way or a bad way. For me, in a bad way.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I pointed this out in my Hobbit 1 review that. If memory serves me right, in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, the orcs were guys in costumes and prosthetics. Here, like half of them are CGI, and I was like, why? That's weird. And they still have dudes. They still have actors in makeup for some of the dwarves, or dwarves. There I go again. Orcs. But why are some of them CGI, especially the 2 main orcs?
Well, that's the thing. The 2 main orcs are the ones you see the most, and those are the ones that stand out the most, or like the most like blatant. Like for me, I don't know. I saw them as CG. They look really like shiny. Like really, I don't know. It was really, really off-putting for me, at least in those scenes.
Right. I guess maybe it's because we're too used to seeing the practical dwarves as opposed to the CG dwarves.
Maybe we're spoiled. I don't know.
There I go again with dwarves and orcs.
But and especially because I just saw Lord of the Rings quite recently, a couple months ago, and the whole trilogy, and it's just so off-putting. Seeing like real, and then all of a sudden going to CGI. It's I don't know. It's like I said, it's really off-putting. But you saw this is the second time you're watching it. You saw it in
the 48 frame, that new 48 frames per second,
and you said that was worse.
Yeah, it was definitely yeah. Watching this in the regular 24 frames per second. Well, I just want to say that I saw this at a Regal Cinema, and they refer to this new version of the Hobbit as HD 3D. So I'm not sure if I despite the fact that they call it HD 3D, I like to refer to it as 48 frames per second. Because that's the technical that's a technical term, and it was really extremely noticeable from like right the get go into that opening scene with Thorin walking in the rain to that tavern. You can tell like something was off, very noticeable, and the thing was it worked well when there were still shots of characters talking to one another, but whenever the camera was still and characters are running across the screen, that's when it became a problem. It just felt very nauseating seeing these characters move so fast, like whether it's running or fighting.
And you mentioned that the necromancer looked bad.
Yes, the special effects do stand out in a bad way. in 48 frames per second, especially the necromancer with all his like these black cloudy tendrils. It just like looks so off-putting, and especially like the golden liquid at the liquid gold at the end.
So it's safe to say, watch it regular.
Right. I mean, don't spend your extra money on it. I mean, I from the first Hobbit movie, I was talking about it a little bit, and I had my doubts on HD 3D, but and while I'd rather prefer the traditional frames per second. I would say that at least I was glad to have seen HD 3D for myself, because while it was a very uneven experience, I'm glad I got to have that experience. So I guess if you're very curious about it, I'd say go in with a cautious mind. And who knows, maybe it might be your thing. The picture quality is very clear, though.
Let me ask you this. How much 3D did the movie actually utilize? Because I swear, in my head, I saw like a couple of scenes where like bees were flying at you.
Yeah. Those bees were probably
that was it.
Yeah. Oh, there was this one where the arrows that would like go at the screen.
So, but those were practically like the only 3D effects. Am I right? Because that's what it seemed like to me. And I was watching it in 2D, obviously, so I don't know. But it felt like it was just those two bees and that one arrow you talked about.
Right. I think that's pretty much it. Like maybe maybe that one scene where one of the characters like knocks out another character with a piece of wood. I think that was another one, I think. And those bees, those are probably the most terrible looking special effects in the whole movie. Maybe they were put in there just to emphasize the 3D at the last minute.
I have one more question about a character specific. What did you think of what was it, the skin changer, or what was the name?
Yeah, I forgot his name, but he was called a skin changer or a skin shifter, something like that.
That's what it was. What did you think of him? Because he was just like a character that was thrown in there. He was in there for like 5 minutes, less, because he was in human form for like a minute, and then was gone.
I thought it was like a very cool use of world building. Like I keep mentioning, they introduced new characters, new species, and he's served as an example as to what the orcs can do, what they're capable of, wiping out an entire race as powerful as his own.
That's true.
So he didn't have a lot to say, but he was very interesting, very kind of like fascinating. So it seems like we're about to go into final thoughts now. So what would you say about The Hobbit Part 2, The Desolation of the Smaug Monster, and your rating?
I had a good time. Like I said, the movie flowed very smoothly. Like we pointed this out. I had a really good time. I still find myself enjoying the Lord of the Rings movies much more. However, I mean, it's it's a different book, entirely. But I'd go watch it. It's definitely a movie going watching, and I'm definitely gonna go back and watch the first one, which I regret not doing, but apparently it's my tradition, so we'll keep that going. As a rating, I'd give it a 3.75. Because I really liked it, but I think it could be better. One thing I really like you said, it's an epic. It's really big, and I really wonder what it's like. They filmed that in New Zealand, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, you gotta appreciate the amount of work put into this movie, especially like the scenery is just amazing. It kind of puts like all the prequel stuff in their green screen backgrounds to shame.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. The scenery, just when it pans out, you just take it all in. But it was a damn good movie. I feel it could be better, and I'm really that cliffhanger.
Yeah,
that goddamn cliffhanger. So,
see you next year.
I gotta wait a whole another 365 days. But I'm really looking forward to the next movie. That one I'm hoping is just peaks it up just a notch up. How about you?
I really dug the hell out of this movie. It was enjoyable on every level. The one thing I forgot to mention was the music, because in my other review of The Hobbit 1, I praised the music for having a very memorable score. Here, for some reason they didn't. Yeah, it was it was unmemorable, and they took out the theme that I really enjoyed.
Was it an original theme, or is it one from the older one? Because I realized they used a lot of the themes from the trilogy.
Right.
And they didn't really add much to that besides a couple of notes here and there.
Do you remember the song that they were singing in? Do you ever saw like the commercials or trailers for The Hobbit 1? They would have the dwarves singing.
I can't say I do.
Well, there was a song that the dwarves would sing, and they turned that into the main theme in the score. But that theme is like gone, and it was I really liked that theme, and I was disappointed to see it gone. And without that theme, because I feel like every movie needs to have a central theme: the Jaws theme, the Batman theme, the Spider-Man theme, the Superman theme.
And it went so well, you figured they would continue using it.
Right, and yeah, that was the thing that kind of like, probably like my biggest complaint would be like the CGI, and well, not so much the CGI because I didn't say I had as much of a problem as you did, but I guess bigger complaint would be the score. So, but other than that, I love the progression of the story. I love the characters. I loved the heck out of Smaug.
Did you like the cliffhanger?
Not so much, but in the context of a trilogy, because it's kind of like if you think of The Empire Strikes Back, how it ends on a very not bad, but a very somber note. And so he's like, oh, what happens next? And so that's when you get Return of the Jedi. So I feel like maybe like 2 years down the road when I have like all 3 movies in my possession.
Care.
Yeah,
Who cares? Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Pop that right in.
Right. So I feel like that's not really affected in the long run. It just shows how good of a cliffhanger that was.
And how much you really want next year to come right now.
Yes. And so I would have to say, like, I gave the original a 5. Maybe that was a bit too high. Maybe looking back, you probably should have given it a 4 because this is a 5. This improves over the first movie.
See, maybe if I had seen the first movie, I'd feel different. Mm-hmm. But again, maybe once I go back, I'll be able to change my mind. But come next year, I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is our review for The Hobbit, the Desolation of Smaug. We hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time, I'm Kaijin Noir.
And I'm Pete.
So take care